kidding going live on YouTube. There'll be a little bit of a lag, but you're feck it.
Right, that'll be 3 minutes late. Look at that. It's terrible, isn't it? Bad timing.
Oh my God.
Shocking. I mean, in fairness, I was outside looking at the sky, and the sky is pretty lovely. Yeah, I hope looking at your sky or having a chance to look at the sky sometime wherever you are, wherever you're listening to it. Sorka, we're going to delve into this post-show chat all about King Mongan. You were looking forward to this one, and I might as well literally ask you straight off the bat before we do any talking to explain your relationship with Dovlaka and why you love her so much.
I don't know.
Because I know there's a bit of a...
She's just great. Listen, I think for context, just in case like some people haven't had a chance to listen to King Mongan, maybe we should give a little bit of background first. Because this is the story of one of the allegedly greatest kings who doesn't really do very much. Which is kind of hilarious to me. I think that one of the first times I actually told this story to a group, the main feedback was, why is this guy so passive? Like, why doesn't he do anything until somebody comes along and goes, hey, this is messed up, you need to do something about it? And then he kind of goes, all right, yeah, and then does magic. But anyway, Mongan is, we heard about his conception last week. He's technically fathered by Manannán mac Lir, although he is legally, I guess, the son of the King of Ulster. And he marries Dovlaka, which is an arranged marriage. They're born on the same day. She's the daughter of the co-king of Ulster. Both of their fathers switch. And we talked a little bit about that last week. And Mongan decides that he's going to go on a tour of Ireland for the purpose of getting gifts from other kings. Because that was like a thing in Ireland. If somebody was very high status, you showed your appreciation for them by giving them stuff. So he kind of like proposes this to his chieftains and lords, and he's like, look, I'm going to get loads of cool stuff, and I'm going to bring it back and divvy it up. And on the way, he sees a magnificent herd of cows, and he says, oh, they're lovely.
It's all about the red cows. White
cows with red ears, man. We said there'd be more. This time there's a whole herd. Last week it was one. This week it's a whole herd of them. And he says he wants what he wants them, and the King of Leinster, who owns them, says you can have them if you give me friendship without refusal, which is another version of this like bargain without knowing thing that we came up against last week as well. And so Mongan agrees, and the King of Leinster's favour that he asks for is Mongan's wife Dovlaka. And that's the first moment where Dovlaka really gets to shine in this story.
I guess, yeah. So, like, Dovlaka obviously is very, very smart, very intelligent. It's a funny story because, like, that's, by the way, the kind of brief overview. Obviously,
it's a brief overview of like the first bit of it, and then I was like, well, let's talk about this bit, and then we can summarize the next bit, and then we can talk about the next bit.
Look, I do actually have a plan for this conversation. Don't worry, we'll get to the talking points. There is a lot of talking points. Basically, it's a really interesting story because constantly changing the narrative structure, and it's just constantly adding an extra little detail, an extra little swing. There's always a plot point to follow, and it's kind of hard to follow. But we'll get to how we talk about and how we analyze stories in a little bit. I do want to literally cut to the chase, right? Because Mongan basically messes up. His wife is down in Dublin or Leinster, let's just whatever, and he has to rescue her. No, but he's in an illness. He's sleeping. He's just gone numb, and Dovlaka. And she does something cool first. But first of all, we have to talk about breasts on the table as a motivation tactic. Playing Fitchel and just deciding to point Mongan in the right direction.
She feels like he needs some motivation. So she gets her tits out and is like, don't you miss me? And he goes, actually, I really do. I mean, that's the second hilarious thing. The first hilarious thing, and I want to come back to the first moment where Dovlaka is in. Because, like, you know, obviously she also gets her tits out as a way of motivating her husband, which is hilarious.
I had to say it for it.
Okay. I know. I'm not shocked that that's your favourite thing she does.
I'm a big fan of hers. I think she's great. She's awesome.
But like, so from her perspective, she doesn't really know Mongan all that well. They grew up apart. They got married when they were 16. They were born on the same day. So there's this kind of like deep connection there on one level. But another level, they don't know each other very well. And one of the first things he does when he's the king of Ulster is he kills her father. And her perspective on this is like, no, you should kill him because he did the wrong thing by killing your father, and therefore you're justified to do this. So she's like, she's someone with this kind of massive integrity towards the code of honor and like how things should be done. Like she's a real queen. She's really aware of like whatever we do reflects on us, reflects on Ulster, reflects on everybody. So like there's a side of her that's like almost cold in her adherence to sort of custom and rule, but then she's also just brilliantly intelligent. Like here comes the king of Leinster with his entire army to visit them and bring the herd of cows, and he says, oh, by the way, the thing that I'm asking you for is your wife. And it's the kind of thing that people go to war over. It's the kind of Helen of Troy thing that like could easily escalate into bloodshed and violence, and she just stops it right there by first saying to Mongan, you gave your word and we're adhering to your word, and then going to Brandov and saying, I'm deeply in love with you, and in order for you to prove your love to me, you have to put me in a separate house and not touch me for a whole year, and then if you do that, I will believe that you are as in love with me as I am with you, and then we can get married. And like he's so egotistical that he fucking believes her. Like she has the measure of this guy. She knows to play to his ego. She knows to play to his honor. And like she just sews up the situation so neatly. And is like, okay, Mongan, you have a year. You have a year to get us out of this. That's your job. I did my job.
Right. I paused. I put pause in the attack, and the instant thread, just neutralized. Okay, things have been great. And it's the whole story is a really interesting look at what is wise and what is the wisdom of Mongan, because he seems like a numpty, and yet Manannán, like, so at the very start of the story, the setup is an interesting construct, even to look at it if you're talking about how the king used to represent the land, and how the story at the beginning has a fractured kingship that is some way shared, that some way seems to work when it's good, but when it goes bad, obviously, the Fionn gets killed by Fiachra Dubh. It's the souring of that relationship, it's the souring of the land. People are angry. It's more turmoil around the place, and then suddenly Mongan Kennedy's kind of like gifted back after not enough. Yeah, he's 16 still. Like,
yeah,
I love how he's just like a little kid thrown into this, but he couldn't have been given back to an unrest. A state filled of like anxiety and anger before he was able for it.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that like he is given back at 16, but Manannán holds on to him for longer than the people of Ulster want. Like they want him back, and Manannán initially says you're not getting him back till he's 12, and then subsequently says no, I'm keeping him till he's 16. So like there is that kind of thing of like he's held back and he's protected from this. But as you say, I mean, I think that's one of the things about Mongan. Mongan, I think, is a little bit like, to me, he's a little bit of a Hamlet type character in that there's an awful lot of time that he spends in the story not acting. Like he spends most of the story not doing anything.
Right?
That thing of,
thinking about it.
My wife has been kidnapped. I don't know what to do about it. I know I'm going to go to bed for 3 months.
Or talk to skulls.
Yeah, like it's that thing of just like you can kind of see it of somebody who's, because he's immensely powerful, right? Like when he and Macandal first, like Mongan's manservant who's married to Dovlaka's maidservant, when they first go to Leinster to visit their wives, they see two priests walking along the road. Macandal has never seen books before. He doesn't know what the head priest is doing. Mongan,
hilarious scene,
which is absolutely hilarious scene. I did not make any of that up. I just got it from the translation and I loved it. Mongan puts a river in front of them. He puts a genuine real life river in front of them and washes them a mile down the road. And not only that, he does know how to read. This is not a literate society. But at some point in his childhood, Manannán Mac Lir taught him how to read and taught him how to read
Right.
Latin. And so he's able to pick this book up. And like I kind of condensed that scene a little bit, but there's a whole scene there where he like blags his way past Brandov and the nobles of Leinster in the guise of this priest.
No way!
Yeah.
Why'd you skip that part?
Because it's a long, confusing, rambly story.
Yeah, it's a long, confusing, rambly story. It is, but like that's again, like to hone in on something that's very important. Like he has magic. He's one of the two Danin, basically. His father's Manannán Mac Lir, so he's he's not one of them, but he's fucking kinda like he's not far off. He's the son of one.
We often have this debate. Manannán is not entirely is not entirely one of the two Danin himself. And also,
I guess
there's less, I think, distinction between it's. I think it's less about the bloodline; it's more about the way he's raised. I think it's more the fact that he grows up in the land of promise.
Sure, I mean that's kind of more what I mean. I guess I get stuck actually. I make the mistake of calling the magic people the two headed animal, but there were a number of peoples that had magic in the land of Ireland, and going back into book invasions, you see that Manannán predates them all, and so of course. But
the sons of Mill have magic, like the Celts have magic. They come to Ireland with magic. They're no relation to the magic people. So there's a kind of funny thing with magic and Irish myth.
But what's really interesting here is this is the first timeline, and it's really landing it into the fact that the kings and queens of Ireland at the time don't have magic, but religion is here. So the church is this is like one of the first times. There's a few instances in like the Children of Lear, and there's a couple of church bells in Bran or the Voyage of Bran. There's a few other in the cycle. But
the other main one that we have told where the
Oisin.
There's Oisin, but no, there's also the one. Maeldoon, the Voyage of Maeldoon. Maeldoon is a very kind of on the cusp of that pagan Christian kind of transition, and this is another one.
But let me form the question is like it's actually interesting because I noticed the things happen before with religion and not been struck by this because there's a seeming, because it's in the King's story. I'm divergently creating this question, sorry.
Okay, I'm going to get some water, but I can still hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so paying attention to what's going on in my head. What's in society is a kingdom and kingdoms and warring tribes and all the rest of it, but the church is now instigated there and heavily respected within the society it's portraying. And yet we have this kind of power balance being shown by the kings and the clerics because they're on the same status as like the bards all of a sudden, and they're elevated into this. And what's the kind of relationship between paganism and Christianity when we come across them, when we come across Christianity in myths?
Well, that's a really interesting one, and like the status is not simple because this is like, and you can see it in this story. Here is a cleric who's a cleric, and here is his kind of person who walks along behind him saying amen in response to the Psalms. The King of Leinster is clearly Christian. Dovlaka is like giving her confession to a priest. And there is no contradiction between this and the fact that Mongan is the son of Manannán Mac Lir. And so you can see the kind of syncretism happening here, actually, where it's not necessarily in conflict. Like, it's not about, and that's a thing that also happened in kind of Irish Christianity anyway. People didn't stop believing in the other world and the fairies. They just folded it in to the Christian belief. So like the fairies became the good people, became the little people, and were kind of reduced in importance. But there was never a question in the Irish kind of, in the mind of the Irish peasant, there was never a question, but they were still there. And it was never a choice between religion, Christianity and superstition. The two went completely hand in hand. And I think that's something that you see in this, because it's not about the Christians here displacing. They're not running after Mongan and trying to burn him at the stake because he can conjure a magic river. Like they don't have that kind of power relationship in the society either. And like there's interesting things in history that happened. Like if you ever got a chance to go to Mellifont Abbey, it was one of the first. It was built by French monks, and it was one of the first stone buildings in Ireland. And the chieftains of Ireland, one of the reasons it became incredibly wealthy was that all the chieftains of Ireland came there, and the thing to do in Ireland is to give gifts. So in order to show their status, they started giving this like monastery of poor stoneworking monks just herds of cattle and hives of bees and piles of gold. And it completely changed things for the monks, because suddenly they had this wealth and suddenly they had this status that they wouldn't have like so there's a weird thing that happens in Ireland and in Christianity. It's very much like over time and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think like there was also a tradition in Ireland of having a learned class that we already had, where the Philid, which was kind of like the Brehons and the Olives and the poets and the Druids, the clerics, as they're usually called in mythology, just folded into that. They became one of the learned classes, and they gradually started displacing the Druids.
I suppose once you give all the money and the gold and the respect to the one side, and it piles up, and it's the new shiny thing, and God knows we do love a new shiny thing, like
and then they started giving it back, and then they started spreading their wealth around, and then it kind of like it became a thing. Anyway, that's one story about how that happened in one particular place in Ireland.
Right. Okay.
But like, it's an interesting transition. And this is one of those stories that's like, it's there, and there's a lot of stories where it's just there. There's a cleric, there's God. They're not necessarily in conflict with each other.
Now it's interesting as well because there does seem to be a skewed, a grey area-ish element with them. Mongan's morals in this. Now, if we kind of look at the church's moral standing on a few things. You wouldn't say Mongan's very... he's killing people left and right, like. He went and killed his uncle.
Well, revenge. I hope Fiacre Dubh isn't his uncle, because if Fiacre Dubh is his uncle, Dubhlac is his cousin. Oh, yeah. But then again, we can't entirely rule it out, because medieval times, they were a bit incesty sometimes.
Yeah, I just kind of Fiacre Dubh. I just thought, they probably just got bored and called one fair, one dove. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's also kind of hard to tell with babies if they're going to be Finn or Dove.
Both Fiacre until you grow up.
Yeah. You don't get a name yet. You'll get a name later when your hair grows in.
It's not a bad way to do it. Don't form any attachment. Don't identify yourself to your name. You are just another Fiacre. Yeah, you'll go and claim your name in the wells of, I don't know, paganism.
Yeah. Or just grow your hair out. If that's the most notable thing about you, we'll just call you after your hair. Be grand.
So the other little tipping point, and like this is kind of going into the structure of stories a little bit, and it's such an interesting one after talking about it last week, is the cow red ears, that trope. And it's almost like a little signal. It's almost like a he's behind you moment. It's almost a little like we get the script here, like something magic is going to happen. It's not going to be a good idea. Or even just an alert to it. Like nothing magic does happen. But it's a kind of...
They're not magic cows. They don't do anything magic. They're just cool.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because just Mongan loves them and thinks, oh my God, they're magical.
He just thinks they're amazing. He just thinks these are amazing cows and I want them. But like, which is again, like I said, it's hilarious. It's that thing of like, you never quite know where the magic is going to come from in an Irish myth, because it's never that simple. It's never, here's a race of magic people and nobody else gets to have magic. And it's never like, white cows with red ears can fly, but no other cows can. Like, you don't know where it's coming from. And this is like a particularly fine herd of cattle. And at the end of the story, it's a particularly fine herd of cattle. And once the bargain is made, they're not mentioned again.
Yeah.
Like, they don't come back into it. They don't, they're just good cows. This is also a culture that was very, very, very heavily into cattle. Like your currency was cattle, your wealth was cattle. A herd of any cattle, like of any cows of the size.
And it's an unusual thing. Like, in fairness, if he was grown up with all the stories and all of the things that we've heard, then, like, in fairness, like, I would also think and assume that they're magic cows. And if you grew up in the land of promise and you saw all the magic stuff, you'd probably be like, they're definitely magic cows. So can I have them? Like,
or even just like
hilarious.
They're the cows that I remember from my childhood. That's what cows look like. That's what maybe there's something nostalgic about these cows. I don't know. It's just kind of
could always be a little like kind of instigated that maybe a man and went up and like made the crows appear just to test them.
Maybe. But yeah, like the white cows with red ears come into it again, just as a kind of an object that gets the story going and gets that like bargain without knowing made. And then the other big instigator character in this is Mackendall.
Mackendall, yeah. So, because he gets him. Well, I was going to ask about the wasting sickness, because what the hell is that about?
He just gets overwhelmed and he has to go to bed for 3 months. I don't know about you and everybody watching, but the idea of everything has gone to shit. You did something incredibly stupid. You have to fix it, and you have a year. It seems entirely like something I would do, to go to bed for 11 months and 20 days and like 29 days and then get up on the last day and fix it all.
I mean, like, I don't encourage it.
I don't either. And I don't know why I'm like that. But at the same time, the more I think about Mongan, the more I'm like, yeah, I feel like he's not the only one who would do that. Because the thing is, he does pull it off. He pulls it out of the bag at the 11th hour on the day of her wedding.
There's also kind of nothing he can literally do. And it's kind of a testament to how much he loves her, how much he's literally... Well, I mean, like, also, presumably he's been a really shit king, which you could have mentioned quite funnily. Like, obviously, everyone wants to go to war because he's been such a shit king.
But,
and yet...
And
he can't do anything anyway. So he just doesn't, doesn't affect anything else too bad. And he decides, right...
Again, this is something. I think there's also something in this, in the symbology of this, of like, he's still a young king. He's not quite there yet. He's not quite ready yet. And I think the turning point for Mongan is the moment when the nobles of Ulster go to him and say, "We'll go to war for you," and he says no. I think that's the moment where he actually steps into being a king, because that's the moment when he fully takes responsibility for it and goes, no, I lost her. This was my fault. I did this through my foolishness. Nobody is to die because of it. I am going to fix this by my wit or not at all. And it's like he clicks into gear then, and he actually goes and sorts it out. I don't know that there's nothing he could have done before that. He does come up with a particularly elegant solution, but he manages to sneak in and see them a fair few times.
Yeah, a couple of times. Yeah, he's well able. Isn't it? That's what's so kind of meandering about the story. It's so funny because and I guess in terms of how you listen, and we talked about this a lot, how you listen to a story, and the more of mythology we seem to dissect and analyze and look at and read. You're realizing how an oral tradition of story goes and how it's constructed with a beat, a new name. And you have to really have the characters well rounded in your head for the listening and for the imagery, and to kind of follow it along. It's it's a great one to re-listen to, because I listened to it when I was driving, and I was getting asked a couple of questions and had to find some directions to find where I was going, whatever. But I was I missed a couple of beats. Because I talked to you about it, you know what's happened. You see the cause, and therefore, or you might have missed the cause, but you see the effect. And yet, if you miss out a beat and you're not used to it, or you don't know the rough outline of it, you can be lost. you can be lost in the listening. And one of the most important aspects of storytelling is kind of listening, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean that's one of the things that you learn. The more stories that you listen to and retell, the more you realize, yeah, the listening is a skill, and also the filtering, the way you listen, because you learn to listen for what is the narrative beat here, regardless of the kind of flourish or the language or the description or whatever. There can be loads of that stuff, and it doesn't really matter one way or another if it's in there or not. And yet the story gets very, very sparse if there's none of it in there. So yeah, you kind of start to listen, and you start to listen for what's important. And this was kind of, I did consider cutting down the year, because I think when I've told this before, I've only had the first intervention by Mac and Dove, where he and Mongan go and impersonate the priests, because that's hilarious. That's a little romp.
Hilarious. That's great. So good. And you think that's the end of the story. Like, you think, and you can't believe that it's back again, and it's back again, and it's back again,
That was it was when I was sitting down to kind of look at it and decide how I was going to tell it for the podcast, that I was like, yeah, but there's a kind of a 3 times thing where he's pushed out to do something, and he's pushed out to do something, and he's pushed out to do something. And it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work. And then it's when he decides himself to own it and to fix it. And it's because that's the first time he does something that isn't motivated by somebody else. That's kind of the first time he does something that isn't somebody asking him to do something and him going along with it. Because they ask him to go to war and he says no. And so I decided, that was kind of why I decided to leave it in, because I was like, I think the, repetition in oral storytelling, we're not,
for a reason, like,
there's a reason, and we're not as used to it, I think, because it doesn't work as well in written storytelling.
But it's funny, like, you can kind of zone out, like, you can literally zone out or be lost for a second. Trust me, I tried today, and listen to it, and then go, oh yeah, I missed that. The first time I listened to it, I missed the little thing that Dovlaka says to the King of Leinster. But then at the very, I tuned in, I was like, oh yeah, no, right, okay, clearly this was Dovlaka's sweeping intervention that she's going down here. And you see that, you're like, oh man, there are so many beats in the story, and it keeps on popping off a new thing to stay and tune in for little episodes, little kind of side stories, little legs, little jokes, little fantastic intervals that are just like, or kind of intersections and stuff that are like really interesting, and has this whole like wisdom of the other world kind of subtle veil over it. It's like, is everything he does wise? It's very subtle, but it becomes like we're talking about. That's the ultimate. He doesn't do anything, because to do anything would cause a war. What he does is the most, like, he sits with a very strong sense of honor, and that kind of dictates his first move in killing the man who killed his father. And by taking that revenge, he's stuck with all of the things that have got him into trouble. He's given his word to get rid of Dovlaka, and now he knows he has to stand up and take account for his actions and go ahead. And lo and behold, as like Manalan gave him all the gifts of the other world, he just magics his way into the hill of the Hag of the Hills. Magics her into a beautiful trap, like, it's just
and she's up for it. Like, it's great. She's like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna go to a party and look amazing and get laid. Happy days. Like,
it's such a random little thought. It's like, where am I going? Fucking, I'll go to the Hag of the Hills. Maybe.
But again, this is the kind of thing that maybe he's been plotting this all year. Maybe he's been thinking, and this also, one of the things that I think is really interesting about this story as well is the idea of like direct versus indirect power, because both Mongan and Dovlaka are quite manipulative in the way that they go about doing things. Like, they don't challenge people to fights. They don't go to war. They tell you what you want to hear, and then they fuck you over when you're looking the other way. Both of them do it. But it's like, I think it's a really interesting thing that in the modern world and in modern culture, we often treat that kind of indirect exercise of power as like a bad thing. We're very suspicious of it. it's very coded feminine. Like it's very kind of seen as like women are manipulative and will like spin you around and make you do things you didn't think you wanted to do. But this is a story where it's not coded by gender. It is just a different way of doing things, and actually it's the smart way of doing things because it means you don't end up killing anybody and you don't get yourself
Yeah,
killed.
yeah.
So I think there's an interesting little thing there as well about like how different kinds of power are viewed and used in Irish myth.
But even like one of the smartest things he does, which is hilarious, is he gets a sod from Scotland and a sod from Ireland. He stands 1 foot. Like, that's just brilliant. Like, even if, you know, like to eradicate any other magics that are going to be thrown at me, you know, defense against druids, throw them off my scent.
I read it. Yeah, I mean, I read it as like, this is a way of, they're going to look for me. And then they're going to go to Brandov and they're going to tell him he has 1 foot in Ireland and 1 foot in Scotland. And Brandov is going to think, oh, well, he must have gone away then. He must be on his way somewhere. He must have left.
Or he's thinking about Scotland. Or
yeah, like it's
does he not have a war with Scotland?
Again, it's like it's a manipulation of truth, and it's a like he's, you know, factually got 1 foot on the side of Ireland, 1 foot of Scotland. Figuratively, that means a different thing. I'm not quite sure what it means, but I'm sure it means it had enough of a meaning that like it was an expression that Brandov would have immediately recognized and drawn a conclusion from. And he's able to manipulate the language. He's able to manipulate the facts to make them seem like something else. Like this is a highly intelligent character. So it's kind of cool, but again, in that way that is like very indirect. And he doesn't come to Leinster with the sword out, you know, the first time. He doesn't come to Leinster, you know, beating down the door to get let in. He comes to Leinster in disguise.
Speaking of hags, so there's 2 hags in this now, and I have a bit of a bone with Mongan. Whatever he does about killing the man who killed his father, whatever about the priest, the poor priest and your man saying amen that he kills. I'll leave him off that one.
He doesn't kill them.
Hag.
He doesn't kill them.
Oh, he doesn't drown. Okay, he almost did.
He asks Mac and Dove. He asks Mac and Dove, should I kill them or not? And Mac and Dove said, you should kill them. And this is again another time when Mongan says, actually, I don't think I will. What he does is he sets the King of Leinster's army on them when they finally arrive and says, that is Mongan in disguise. But they don't die. They just get chased and all of their servants die.
The 9 lads get killed.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Some people get killed. Any more what?
Leinster people get killed, it's fine.
Listen, it's fine.
But I mean about the hag that's listening and going, oh, that's terrible. Oh, jeez, no. The clergy get enough. Oh, no, this is terrible. And then killing her. He just kills her.
He just kills her. That's cold.
Oh.
It's cold.
That is cold. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's again a strange relationship for people to have straight at hags, to mistrust them, not want them around. Want to kill them? It's not much.
That particular hag is like
not a nice hag.
She's not. It's not that she's not a nice hag. It's that she's a Leinster hag. She's going to tell the King of Leinster what happens.
Yeah.
It's not the fact of her being a hag. It's the fact of her being a witness. She saw everything that happened. Now, again, rather hilariously.
Saw or heard?
Well, that's not entirely clear. She was sitting in the corner.
Oh God!
That's not how they do confession in my parish.
Have you been here the whole time?
Yes. Bam! Killed.
I mean, in that case, that's fair enough. Yeah. Well, I just swung and hit her. I didn't even mean to chop right off. I just, whoa. That's obviously what we do. It's just defense. I was a witch. Anyway, okay.
She's a potential spy, is the point.
Yeah, again, sticking with honor codes. So there's something that doesn't get wrapped up in this, and it's just one little thing that irked me. And it's like, hang on, random conversation with the King of Leinster. What's his name again?
Brandov. Everybody is
Brandov,
Dove in
so
this.
Brandov.
There's Dove Laka and there's Brandov and there's Sacred Dove. There's a lot of black-haired people in this story.
Yeah, it's such a weird, like, it's not all the names are so similar. It's kind of, that makes it kind of hard to follow and like ridiculous. But anyway,
yeah. On the other hand, when you're telling it, you only have to remember Dove, and then you'll have like 4 of the names, and it's fine.
Already forgotten the King of Leinster's name. So Dovlaka promises to tell him that whenever she's longing for Mongan, so then he'll know whenever he's not there.
Yeah.
So does she do that? Does she tell him every day that she's longing for? No. In wonder, he goes off the Hag of the Hills. He wonders going, so yeah, I'm still longing for him. Yeah, today I'm still longing for him. Well, I'm still longing for him. Yeah, longing for him.
I mean, this is an interesting one because it's kind of like, I think this is Brandov starting to cop on that these people are operating on another level. And he's like, I got one over on Mongan, and I know that you're not going to tell me when he's here because you've just told me that he has a right to be there. So you're not going to come running to me for that. So what about if you tell me when he's not here? Aha! And like, I don't think she has any intention of doing it. I don't think she does it. Like, I think that's why it's not mentioned again. I don't think she does it. I think she's like, well, I was going to lie to you about one thing, and now I'll just lie to you about something else, you dickhead. You know what I mean? Like, I just...
Yeah. It's a very funny one for me. Again, for some reason, I think everybody in this is a little like, I don't know, kind of 90210. Bear with me. Everybody's kind of young, like really in their prime, youthfully, and very
yet, ironically,
beings,
that is a super old reference.
I know, right? I thought you'd like it. But yeah, it all that's why parallels, because in the little time snap that program is.
There have been no teen dramas since then, obviously.
This damn story seems like a teen drama. I wasn't a teenager every other time, okay? Leave me alone. Shut up.
In fairness,
Misfits, all right? I saw it too.
I know. Yeah.
Shut up. Too late.
I know pop culture. Shut up.
That's also super. Skins is deadly.
Skins.
God damn it.
That's only about 20 years old. That's cool. Yeah.
Shut up. I don't watch TV. What was my question? Oh, yeah.
I don't know. You were talking about it being like a teen drama. And I was laughing at the fact that you haven't watched a teen drama since the early 90s. In fairness, I don't think I have either.
There. In fairness. But anyway, my point was, everyone seems super young in this. And this king seems to kind of go like, yeah, I can do a smart one over you. Whenever you are longing for him, then you got to tell me, I got one. Take that for a plot twist. And then it never comes back to him because it wasn't plot twist.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was just really stupid. It was like, I feel like you'll lie about telling me when he's here. So tell me when he's not. No, man. If she's gonna lie about one thing, she's gonna lie about the other thing too. This is not a fact. You're not as good at this as you think you are. No, which is kind of like, I think Brandov, certainly in that regard, and in his behavior in the final act, does not come off as the brightest penny in the fountain. But he massively gets one over on Mongan in the beginning. And there's a kind of a, like, again, Mongan hasn't been around. He doesn't know the relationships between people. We don't know if Brandov and Dovlaka have ever met before. We don't know why he's obsessed with her. We don't know if have they had an interaction? Has he seen her? Has he heard of her? Like, he's very set on getting her. But there's no kind of backstory to that. And, like, did he plan this? Does he know that